The Jersey Devil, 13th child. There was a child born of a woman. He was an infant and once a lecherous fallen angel legend. The woman, Leeds, was down and out, and when she was in labor, she yelled out with a shout, "With all my poverty and my sin, I have lived the life that I have chosen. Here now I have 12 children to feed. Please lift me now from this one who makes me bleed." A girl or boy or mixed in breed, the tempest winds did plant a seed, and there she had the child of a beast. So off he went to have his feast. He flew from the womb and onto the ground, and there he left all footprints around. He sank deep in the cavern or abyss until it was time for him to repent of his sins. A burnished tone of red and glass, he changed his countenance to resemble all animals in one blast. The head of a horse, the face of a dog, a winged bat stretching beyond his arms, the hooves of a goat, and claws of a fowl. It was a terrifying wind of perpetual sightings. He frightened some visitors who dared to enter Pine Barrens. How can this be? A child spawn? He lives amongst the trees and thorns and feeds upon the fears of humans. He lives by the gates that trick all of them. They said he was a she, or could it be? It doesn't matter, because he can shapeshift effectively. So the planet of powers took him to account and set his foot fast to Pine Barrens. For more than 100 years he stayed within the range of the forest. A chain was set on each of his legs, but hindered him not from making his plans in this place. He roamed free in form and changed his shape until he was loosed from the black cape that he had worn. A Batman, a goat-like devil, a head of a horse, a jackal-faced fellow, legs of a crane, and a serpent body from the Garden of Eden. He had all the likeness of a modern-day reptilian. A record written, a sign from the past, a time in ancient Greece in Thessaly, where the bronze men of warriors did exist. It was a mighty time for King Deculion and Queen Pyrrha, the two powerful Thessalians. The story speaks of an ancient flood when Zeus did find he was displeased with it all. The only way that they could find the land back home was to follow the sounds of the screams of cranes and howls of wolves on every track. Many had died in the deluge of that time. The earth was filled with water, and no man or woman could they find. Both Deculion and Pyrrha asked Zeus to bring back the primordial place to create, where men, women, and animals could return to their former existence. The devil did remember this. Despite all happenings and disagreements, many saw the importance and value of all that is living. The animal likeness was from the primordial stew of mixing many animals before they formed entirely the way they usually do. The oracle spoke, and they were granted their wish. Zeus said, "Toss the stones over your shoulder, and make all the women and men as you desire." So they threw the oracle's stones as suggested. Pyrrha made the stones turn into women, and Deculion turned his stones into men. All the while, the earth continued boiling within this primordial beginning. And the following is a quote from Ovid, Metamorphoses 1. For though the flames may be the foes of water, everything that lives begins in humid vapor, and it seems discordant concord is the means of life. When earth spread over with diluvian ooze, felt heat ethereal from the glowing sun, unnumbered species to the light she gave, and gave to being many an ancient form, or monster new created.
Hello everyone. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview of this story because it's kind of strange and disturbing. In fact, there is this legend called the Jersey Devil. This wasn't just something that Edgar Allan Poe created as a story or gave that to me, but there is a legend in New Jersey. That's why they call it the Jersey Devil, in a place called Pine Barrows. And so, just like many of the things, kind of like historical accounts like Jack the Ripper and some others in this book, there's a reference to things, or like the Land of Apples, where I talk about that location, which was already previously written about. So here I'm just giving you the rendition of the story coming from Poe that seems to have some insight regarding what happened here. So, in the true legend, the original legend, there was a woman by the name of Leeds, Leeds, and she had all these children, and this was the 13th child, so we're still on the topic of 13. The 13th child, at this point, she didn't want the child, and so he's pretty much telling me what was said during that time, like she didn't want this last child. It also seems as if she had some kind of hybrid or something going on in order for this kind of story to come out. I mean, I can't imagine that people would make up such a strange and unusual story, even though people were quite superstitious. There has always been paranormal and very odd happenings. It kind of reminds you of the whole Rosemary's Baby situation where, there's this child, it's sort of a spawn of some sort, and they don't really know what it is, and of course they call it the devil. Instead of Damien, this is the devil. And so Poe tells the story, and describing the Jersey Devil is the way that it was described, and this was somewhat documented. And then of course the many hauntings or the paranormal of people actually citing this creature in Pine Barrows. And so, it just talks about what this is, what's going on here. And so, it's saying it's like a Batman, a goat-like devil, a head of a horse, a jackal-faced fellow. It's just, this is, something that's a serpent body. There's a lot of different pieces of what we would identify as an archetype. So then in the story, he turns into giving us an understanding of Greece, and he brings me to Greece and the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha. And for many of you know, I've communicated with those two. I kind of had an encounter with them when I was doing the Andronicus transmissions. And I was calling her Petra instead of Pyrrha, but it's essentially the same beings, and they were, we'll say, a type of Adam and Eve, because there's more than one, but in the history of the ancient Greek, they talked to Zeus, which is, it could be Andronicus or it might not be Andronicus. because there's a reference of him destroying the earth through a flood. And that was also, incited by some others, So this is after the fact. It is essentially the rebuild and reintroduction to another humanoid group, because we're not the first ones to be here. And, essentially they, what they did was they picked up these, let's see, they picked up these stones and then turned it into, Pyre decided to make women, Deucalion decided to make males. So instead of the Adam and Eve story, you have an introduction of another group that comes in after. And, one might say, well, how come we haven't seen like this huge, demarcation of this new group coming in afterwards? Well, what's interesting, if you do read the Bible and the story of Noah, that Noah has his lineage, but for some reason, similar to the story of Adam and Eve, there's people around. Well, where did all those people come from? And so there is speculation as to whether, time had elapsed, they lived longer, and so the population had increased. So at this point, these others, that, some of them are good and some of them are bad. And, the biblical rendition there is, it's usually, it's us and them, because they were the chosen ones, and then everyone else is kind of, in the background. And so there's a struggle over, land and this and that. But in this case, you see a civilization that comes up according to the ancient Greeks. And they talk about a whole other, humanoid race coming in, created by Deucalion and Pyra, but, maybe created in one place dimensionally and then introduced in. So however it was done, maybe introducing new souls or old souls through another body, or however they did it, but supposedly this is something that occurred. But that's not really the topic of the story. The story is pretty much, how did all this happen that we have this Jersey Devil? And so then it goes on further. And the reason why we go back to Greek history, you can call it mythology if you want. I'm going to call it Greek history because everyone has a piece of the pie or piece of the puzzle that explains a lot of different things. And what they do is they actually, start quoting about how this primordial space, that's brought in, this place that brings in, it's a humid vapor, and it brings in life. This is the Diluvian ooze, or, where the beginnings of life, kind of create and manifest, and it's sort of like this, place of development and growth, whether it's genetics or something else. And of course, it's probably more complex than we can imagine, but it's a primordial ooze. And from the heat, ethereal, from the glowing sun, and then there's unnumbered species to the light she gave. So they bring in this primordial ooze to help bring in some other things, which brings us also to the topic of some of these primordials that obviously had access into our planet. And here a primordial was created, as many other animals and creatures and humanoids and all sorts of different variations can be and have been created in the past. And so it was the combination of many species rolled into one that made this monster new created. And so it was like a hint. Something that Poe directed me to was this story from Ovid in Metamorphosis. So, I mean, you could probably read more about the story and see a little bit. There's definitely, information that kind of hints of some of the oddities and things that are unexplained on the planet. And so here's one of them. Because the Jersey Devil is not necessarily the devil, but a primordial that was a combination of many different species. And presently we have issues of hybrids, and which made me wonder if this woman with the last name Leeds was actually a hybrid. And so you can see that she had possibly some karmic issues or some struggles, maybe just the difficulty of living in those days as it is now when you have a large family, the cost of it. And so, and also there was kind of, I think that the preachers of those days considered her to be not of someone that was pure or holy, and so they already had an issue with her and considered what she had done as a curse. And so that's why, as in their history in the U.S., there is a story about her. But I don't think that she was supposed to have been cursed, but that, in fact, she was probably a hybrid. And the child came out as a hybrid, or she was tampered with in some way. So the other children were fine, but by the last child, this was definitely something else going on. So I saw that, yesterday I put together the 13 with the 13 fallen angels story, and I knew that this story goes along with it just because it's related to the number 13. And I also feel that this is the completion of the 13, that the number 13, a reference to it and how it relates to things on our planet that needed to be resolved. And Poe brought this to my attention. So as soon as we published the story about the 13 fallen angels, I stumbled upon this video, and it presented itself to me. And it was about this woman who was competing in the X Factor. And sure enough, where is she from? But Leeds. The thing that she says is, which makes her stand out, and also what drew my attention is she goes by the name of Ariel. She performs under the name of Ariel. She's supposed to be the infamous angry X Factor girl, and she dies at the age of 38. So I guess she performed around 2008, was rejected. The reason why she caught everyone's attention is because when they called her up or called her by her number, she said, I'm a human, I'm not a number. And so I knew that there was something else going on here. She also calls herself, sort of wearing like mermaid hair, if I can say it like that, and has an affinity for, kind of this look that's very mermaid-like, which, it made me think of the Neptunians, and if in fact this was the same individual who was Mrs. Leeds in the story of the Jersey Devil. I believe it's the same one. And in both stories, it looks like they had a sad ending. And hopefully, this is the part of being misunderstood, and maybe also the anger that kind of carried over. Now, some people may think that this is far fetched or whatever, but interesting similarities in my opinion, and something to consider. But when I saw the name Ariel, when I saw that she sort of was in a mermaid outfit, that it wasn't so much, I don't know, maybe she thought she was a good singer. Maybe she is in some way, but under different circumstances. Her proclamation of being a human and not a number is someone that is aware of what's going on, and seeing that humanity has its individuality, purpose, and sentience. And so, in the end, and this is my opinion, that this was the same soul that went through this difficult journey, and I really hope that she finds her place of peace. And I hope that those that have a hybrid lineage can find their place in the universe somewhere in peace, because apparently that population is growing. So that's the end of the story, and thank you for listening always.